So welcome to our new episode number 4 where we'll be creating a bass patch. And before we do so, I just want to talk with you about what is important when you create a bass, what to spend attention on, what to consider. So like before, every patch type that you create has a specific purpose, and you should make sure that it's really good at what it should be good at, and it must not be able to do everything else well. So for instance, let's pick a bass from my Analog Cyberpunk sound set just to show you what I mean. So let's take for instance this Crusher bass, which is pretty strong. So it's supposed to sound good down here, right? So a bass plays on the lower register to accompany your song, to add low end, to support it. So it's really important that it sounds good here. Rather than here. In this case, it does sound good up here because, like, if I play something like this, so you could actually play a lead with this, but it's not really a great sound, you know, like it's possible, but it doesn't really sound great. It would need some delay, some other filter settings maybe to really carve this out as a lead sound. But down here, just a random sequence, not supposed to sound good, but you just from the sound itself, it sounds way thicker and powerful down here. So this is the purpose of the bass. It's not made to play up here. If we maybe look at another one that I have, like this lower district bass, sounds like this down here. But up here, so way better in the low end, because that's the purpose. So don't worry if your bass is not going to sound good up here. You don't need to make it sound good here, because that's not the purpose. Most of the time it won't never play there. So just keep this in mind, and then let's now just jump straight into the bass. And by the way, there are two ways of basses. So I mean there are more than two, but two most common. Let me first bring the cutoff down. So you can get either, or let me introduce a sub oscillator quickly, so we have a little bit more of low end. So you can either have a bass like this, which is for sustained notes, so I could play something like this. Of course, this doesn't really sound good now. It's just to give you the core idea. Or you could have a bass with a quick attack. So we again take our envelope 2, as you know, as we did in other lessons, and bring it to the cutoff filter to add more power. And if I play this now, it's more made for short notes. So if I hold it down, you can still play a sequence like this with it, but it will have the stronger attack transient. And it's important for you to decide what kind of bass do you want. Do you want more this rolling, subtle bass in the back without this clicky attack, or do you want to have this one here, which is better for sequences? So let's just play back a sequence here. So this one handles the sequence way better than without this envelope, right? Because this doesn't really put so much emphasis on each little note. So if I hold it down now, or even lower, so just keep this in mind when you create basses, that you have these two main opportunities. Of course there's even more, but that goes into the advanced range. Like if you want to create stuff like wobble bass as you know it from dubstep or some experimental stuff with the filter, we will go for a clicky bass here now, or a more piercing bass. So I think this is actually already a good bass for our bass. This was really not intended to make this joke, but it sounds good so far. So we can add some resonance on bass. It really adds character. But I would be subtle with it, because as I say, the bass is more made for the lower register, and if you increase this as well so much, you can see it, like we have a boost of frequencies here, and from the spectrum, just from the picture, you can tell that this is not the low end. The low end is around here, so this would really go too much into your mix. So just use it subtle maybe. If you want, you don't need to put resonance on, but I think it's not bad. And then we could actually, so usually I create a patch first in its core and then add effects in the end, so that the core sound is done and I know how it sounds without effects. But just before we start moving on, you usually don't want to put reverb on your bass, because the bass is more in the middle and strong in the mix, and it's not there to fill the whole mix with its tail. Of course, there are no hardwired rules, as I always say. If you have a song and you're like, oh, reverb perfectly fits in here, then you can go for it. There's no rule that forbids it to you. But if I play this now, so this is way less powerful than this. And it might sound good in isolation, but if you use it in your composition, it can easily bring problems into your mix, because it has a lot of low end that is now being, like made longer by the reverb tail. So just a heads up, I wouldn't put reverb on it unless you have a specific purpose for that in your song. With delay, it's kind of similar. Sometimes a little bit of delay can make a bass a bit more interesting, but really depends on what you're doing. If you play short sequence like this, you won't have a lot of effect from the bass, because the notes play so quick that you don't hear the delay anyway. But if I play this solo now, like something like this, or let me actually find a good rhythm first. So let's go for dotted, then maybe this. So if I play this, doesn't really sound really good now, just so you get the idea, right? If I would be playing something like this, it would maybe benefit a little bit from the delay, because it creates a rhythm with the bass, right? So I can play with this rhythm. Just as an idea, so really just sloppy playing, not really good sounding, but I just want to show you the concept of this idea. But usually I wouldn't use delay as well on the bass. Things that are common on bass is stuff like distortion, overdrive, because you just make it sound more powerful. Something like this. But this again, like the wave folder is the really harsh version of the distortion, so I think this doesn't sound really good, but doesn't really sound good as well in my opinion. Let's see this one. Let's try without the resonance. Yeah, a little bit better now. But this is still pretty strong, right? So what we could be doing again is bringing this down and just let our envelope do this for us and open it only for a short amount of time, so we don't have this strong effect all the time. Or we going to take a separate envelope number 3 so we can mess a little bit with the timings. And maybe start a little bit in already, so we have a little bit of basic distortion and don't start at 0, and bring this a little bit back in compensation. Yeah, this sounds way better. So without. So I hope you can hear the difference. It's not much, it's not really important at this point, but as always it adds a little bit. So now we can maybe use our envelope 2 for resonance. But I wouldn't do it in this case because it all starts to get too harsh on the higher frequencies, in my opinion. Of course, this is something we can take care of, so we could click in here and bring in an equalizer, which I will be explaining later, but could just filter out a little bit of the higher frequency so it sounds a little bit more smooth. And we will be talking later as well about the plug-in chain, so the order that you put effects in. So don't worry, we'll be covering all of this. So what we could do now to make this bass thicker and stronger is we could try to bring in a third oscillator. Let's see. Maybe really subtle. So this is all it's giving now. Let's see if we can bring in some modulation, if it sounds good. Here at this really small value, it becomes a little bit more edgy and gritty. So if you bring this more up, it will sound more metallic and high. Here's the basic sound, but if we just bring in like a little bit of amount, it just already has impact. Maybe some drift from the drift button. As you know, it gives each note a little shift in the fine-tune amount. So what we did with this button before. So let's see, can we do something with an LFO? That would sound good here. Bring a little bit more breath into this patch. The thing is that with the bass, since we're playing all these short notes, you won't really hear a lot from the LFO. I guess, because it's just all happening too quick. But so if I hold down, of course you hear this. But maybe if you play. Well, this is too strong because we can't control it. If you play, you never can really good time when this happens and when not. So I wouldn't be doing this. I mean, the bass itself is pretty solid right now. But it's really basic as well. So unison is something we could put on it, but it will bring this bass more into the stereo field. So this sounds thicker now. But it's more present now in the left and right speaker. Regarding unison, what it does is, you see the voices button here, it creates basically duplicates of our patch. So the default is 1, so this means just our patch. If you bring this up to 2, it will mean that we have our patch duplicated once. So we have 2 instances of our patch, and the more you go up, the more we have. So this is 8 times our patch. Then we have the detune button, which determines how their fine tune pitch is being detuned from each other. So if I increase this, you will hear all of the 8 voices have different fine tune settings. So this is the really extreme amount, so you can hear what it does. But if you bring it in a little bit, it will just add more wideness to the sound and more motion. As you can hear it swings like this, right? It has some movement. The higher you go, the quicker it will become, or even slower. The problem, however, with this is, like I said, it goes more into your mix. The bass becomes more prominent in the front and can bring trouble into your mix with your other instruments that should be in the front, because it steals their show. You could work against this with the stereo button, make it mono again, like this, still thicker than like this. Well, thicker in dimension, so you have the feeling that this is deeper, right? It's wider, but this one is stronger. So unison might not be the best way on a bass. You can do it, I have it on some patches, but for this one I wouldn't go for it. But just so you know what unison does, because the purpose, I mean, we are creating patches now, but sometimes I just want to show you something and tell you how to use it and why not to use it. So it's not that much about making this patch now the best bass that we have ever heard. It's more about playing through all the options and opportunities and explaining some of these functions to you. So actually, I would say that I like the bass the way it is now. I wouldn't really start to mess more with it. Like, the bass usually is something in the back that is subtle. Sometimes people create kind of, types of music or tracks where the bass is more the important thing in the middle. So these are songs then where the bass is in the same time the lead instrument, and then you have just some effects being here and there, some pads and percussion mainly. So if you go into the electronic or experimental music, a bass patch could of course sound way more interesting than this one. But this one here is a good bass for every other song where it just sits in the back, right? It just supports. the bass is something that is not so super prominent, and this is why you shouldn't overload your bass, because then it could make your mix, could really bring trouble into your mix, so you have a hard time taming the bass and bringing it in and playing well with the other instruments together. So this is a pretty nice, real basic example. So without LFOs, because the notes are too short to really have a benefit from it, what you could do is, of course, now add some stuff to the mod wheel. So let's, for instance, bring down the filter here, and then if you play the sequence, you could just have nice filter sweeps like this. So this is pretty, I think that I use pretty commonly on my bass patches, because I think this is something you always want to have easy access to on your mod wheel. I like this. And what you could be doing, of course, as well, is like, let's make this fewer, but then decreasing the decay and the release time, so we will get this effect. The clickiness is being reduced, right? So this is something that could be usable on a bass patch. So I'm doing this now with my mod wheel. Even you can do stuff like this. Yeah, and effect wise, there's not so much stuff that you can use on this otherwise. Maybe compression and stuff like this, but we will be talking about this later and in other lessons. So I would leave it at this point. Sometimes it's just better to keep things simple and keep them the way they are, so you don't need to always go full ham just because you can. Sometimes patches are just better when they are simple. So we will see us in the next chapter 2, where we will be talking about this middle section and dive deeper into LFOs and functions and randomizers. I will give you some practical examples. It will be really interesting. I will do it on my Soundset patches, and I will give you way more insights into this. So stay tuned and see you in the next chapter.